Stop following my son, you lowlife. He's not here anymore.
3 years after breaking off our engagement, I ran into Jordy, my former father-in-law, at the hospital. He yelled at me right away.
I haven't seen Rick since that day.
I managed to reply, but Jordy's scowl didn't change.
Don't lie. You stalker. Because of you, Rick had to quit this place.
Dr. Knowles, please lower your voice. You're scaring the patients. And this woman is. Other doctors tried to calm Jordy down, but he took his frustrations out on me.
Rick suddenly quit this hospital. My son, who never defied me, had to leave because you wouldn't stop following him. Wait a minute. I told you, I haven't seen him since that day. Rick left on his own accord. Don't make me laugh. It's all your fault. Because of you, a child of a worthless mother, my son started defying me. My wife was so shocked she left me. You ruined my family.
There's no point talking to this man any longer. Not only did he insult my mother, but he also blamed me for his son and wife leaving him, completely unaware of how much he had been stifling them. I was furious. Ignoring the red-faced Jordy, I walked away.
Hey, we're not done talking.
Just as Jordy grabbed my shoulder, a startled voice rang out. My name is Liliana. My life changed dramatically when my father passed away suddenly while I was in high school. My mother became depressed and her health deteriorated. Carrying an indescribable sense of anxiety, I decided to start working right after high school to support my family and my younger brother's future. Still, I was fortunate with my work relationships. The law firm where I worked as a secretary during the day had a good atmosphere, and the boss was very kind to me. The pub where I worked at night was run by a couple and frequented by nice regulars. I loved the homey atmosphere and the meals the owner cooked. Then, a few years after I started working, it was an ordinary Friday. How unusual, a young person coming in alone. The pub's clientele was mainly people in their 40s and older. But that day, a man who looked to be in his 20s, around my age, came in alone. While other customers were enjoying their meals and drinks, this man looked unhappy. I even heard him sigh a few times. He stood out because we rarely had customers close to my age, and he had a gloomy aura. From that day on, he became a regular, coming in every second and fourth Friday. He introduced himself as Rick Knowles. Rick usually ate in silence and left after about an hour, but gradually he started talking to me and the owners, and stayed longer. Rick continued to visit on those Fridays, making small talk before leaving. I started looking forward to the Fridays when he would come in. About a year after Rick started coming to the pub, he asked me out on a date. I had been working nonstop since high school, and love seemed like a distant dream. It was then that I realized I had feelings for Rick. I was thrilled when Rick asked me out. After a few dates, we decided to become a couple. By then, my younger brother had started college, so I had a bit more time for myself. I didn't know what Rick did for a living until we started dating. He told me he was a medical resident at a private university hospital. That explained why he always seemed so down. His family was full of doctors, and his father, also a surgeon, worked at the same hospital. Apparently, he didn't get to choose where he worked. His father took great pride in their long line of doctors and looked down on anyone who wasn't a surgeon. He also held a powerful position at the hospital. You're destined to take over the surgery department. You should be able to handle this much, his father would say, always demanding more from Rick. Under his father's watchful eye and constant pressure, Rick was struggling. I encouraged him. because I genuinely admired his dedication. You're your own person, Rick. You don't have to follow your dad's path to be a great doctor. You're already working so hard.
Thank you, Liliana. Hearing you say that lightens my load.
Even though we'd only been dating for a few months, Rick's commitment was intense. He barely had time to rest, always studying. His only free time was on the second and fourth Fridays. And our occasional dates. Despite the immense pressure from his father, Rick never slacked off in his duties as a doctor, committed to saving lives. That's why I didn't mind our limited time together. In fact, seeing Rick work so hard inspired me to set my own goals.
Boss, I've decided. I'm going to become a lawyer. I've even started studying a bit.
Great. If that's the case, I'll support you all the way. If you have any questions, just ask. I'd been considering it for a while, especially since my boss had suggested it before. Now, I was committed to becoming a lawyer. Rick was doing his best to save lives as a doctor. To be worthy of him, I wanted to be helpful to people too. So, I started preparing for the bar exam. I'd seen legal documents before, but studying them made me realize how much I didn't know. There were times when I felt like giving up, but Rick would say, "Let's keep pushing through, together." He never laughed at me for aiming high, even though I only had a high school diploma. Though our goals were different, it felt like we were in this struggle together. A few years after we started dating, Rick, now more confident as a doctor, proposed to me. I was so happy that tears started flowing from my eyes. I accepted his proposal right then and there. But a new challenge awaited me. Meeting his parents. I'd heard that his mother, Catherine, was a kind and gentle person, but his father, Jordy, was quite the opposite. Even Rick, a surgeon, faced immense pressure from his father. So, I was filled with anxiety about whether a high school graduate like me would ever be accepted. Still, I want to be accepted. Nervous but determined, I headed to Rick's family home. I had recently passed the preliminary bar exam. Passing this exam proves that you have the equivalent skills of someone who has completed law school, which is a requirement for becoming a lawyer. Knowing I had passed gave me a boost of confidence. When Rick and I arrived at his home, his parents welcomed me warmly, contrary to my fears. Both Catherine and Jordy were smiling, which eased my tension a bit. But that relief was short-lived. Jordy immediately started grilling me about my education and family background. When I answered, he became furious.
So you're saying you didn't even go to college? Yes. My father passed away when I was in high school. That's irrelevant. Didn't your mother make sure you went to college? Unthinkable. Marrying into our family is out of the question.
Dad. Liliana has been working multiple jobs since high school to support her family. You can't just...
Quiet. You have no say in this. Bringing a woman like her into our home. We'd be the laughingstock of the community. Jordy. That's too harsh.
Catherine softly interjected, but Jordy was unstoppable.
Our family has a long history of producing doctors. Marrying a woman like you would tarnish our reputation. I may be a high school graduate, but I'm working hard to become a lawyer. I've even passed the preliminary bar exam.
Desperate for his approval, I mustered the courage to talk back. But Jordy's expression didn't change.
So what? You're still a high school graduate. I won't accept a woman like you as my son's wife. Leave this house immediately.
I don't remember how I got home. When I came to, I was sitting in my living room. Multiple missed calls and messages from Rick were on my phone. I'm really sorry about today. I'll try to convince them to accept us. I'm sorry for putting you through this. Although many comforting words arrived, my mind was made up. I wasn't ready to be with Rick. The idea of marrying him seemed like a fairy tale. Rick, you're already doing great as a doctor. You'll eventually break free from your father's control. Keep pushing forward. I can't be there to support you, but I'll always be cheering for you. I sent that message and chose to walk separate paths. 3 years passed. I was on my way to a particular place, my steps heavy. Because that place was the hospital where Rick worked. If I run into Rick, I'll try to smile. But if I encountered Jordy, the thought weighed heavily on my mind. No. I'm here for work today. I kept telling myself to stay focused as I walked into the hospital. But then, my worst fear came true. Jordy appeared before me. He seemed to notice me almost as soon as I noticed him. Leaving the doctors who were surrounding him, he walked over to me and started yelling with a face full of anger.
Stop clinging to my son! He's not here anymore! What?
Caught off guard by his sudden outburst, I was momentarily speechless.
I haven't seen Rick since that day.
I managed to say, but Jordy's scowl didn't change.
Don't lie! You stalker! It's because of you that Rick had to leave this place.
Dr. Knowles, please lower your voice. You're scaring the patients. And this lady is. The surrounding doctors tried to calm Jordy down, but he continued to lash out at me.
Rick suddenly said he's quitting this hospital. My son, who never defied me. It's because you were clinging to him that he had no choice but to leave. Wait a minute. I told you, I haven't seen him since that day. If he left, it was his decision. That's impossible. Rick changed because of you. Even my wife started defying me because of him.
Don't blame me for your wife's actions too. Don't you think you're at fault here? My frustration was mounting, and my voice grew louder. The atmosphere among the surrounding doctors was tense, but Jordy continued to look down on me.
Don't make me laugh. It's all your fault. My son started defying me because of you, a child of a worthless mother. My wife was so shocked she left me. You destroyed my family.
There's no point in talking to this man any longer. Not only did he insult my mother, but he also blamed me for his son and wife leaving him, completely oblivious to how much he had been oppressing them. My anger reached its peak. Ignoring Jordy, who was red in the face, I walked on.
Hey, we're not done talking.
Just as Jordy grabbed my shoulder, a flustered voice rang out.
Stop this at once.
I turned toward the voice and saw a middle-aged man standing there. Jordy immediately straightened his lab coat upon noticing the man.
Director, thank you for taking the time to come here. I'll make sure today's lecture goes well.
Jordy had apparently retired from this hospital a while ago and was now working part-time and giving lectures. He was happily discussing today's lecture topic. After finishing his conversation with the director, Jordy turned to me and said loudly enough for everyone to hear.
You're still here? A high school graduate with only one parent has no business being here. Leave immediately.
He had just said, we're not done talking, but now he was telling me to leave. Perhaps he wanted to show off in front of the director, but it completely backfired.
Jordy, how dare you say something so rude? Besides, I didn't come here to see you. I came to see her. What?
Caught off guard by the unexpected words, Jordy looked stunned. The director shot him a glare filled with anger.
She's the attorney handling the lawsuit this hospital is currently facing. How dare you treat her so rudely? A lawyer? Her? Enough. If you continue to be disrespectful, there will be consequences. Wait, director. There must be some mistake. She's just a high school graduate and from a single-parent home. How could she possibly become a lawyer and ruin my family?
Jordy seemed to be trying to convince himself that I couldn't be a lawyer. But the director was telling the truth. After that incident, I passed the bar exam and became an attorney. About 6 months ago, this hospital was sued by a patient's family for alleged medical malpractice. I was called in as the lead attorney, something Jordy, who had retired, was apparently unaware of. Despite the director's warning, Jordy continued to belittle me. The director confronted him fiercely.
Didn't you understand what I said? If you're rude to her, you won't get off lightly. Director!
Jordy looked overwhelmed. Realizing he was in trouble, his face turned pale. The director continued with undeniable authority.
Today's lecture is cancelled. You will never be invited back as a speaker. Furthermore, you are banned from any future involvement with this hospital. What? Wait. What do you mean, banned? Don't you understand? You're fired. Fired.
At the word fired, Jordy collapsed to his knees.
Director, this is the only place I have left. My son and wife are gone, and this is the only place where I feel I have a purpose. Please, anything but firing me. That's not my concern. I'm not foolish enough to employ an unreasonable doctor for such reasons. What? Without me, the surgery department won't function, right? Is that okay?
That's only your opinion. The surgery department will function just fine without you.
Let this be a lesson. Overconfidence can be your downfall.
The director said only that and left Jordy, who was in shock, as he led me away. Afterward, it seems Jordy was officially fired. He was also shunned by his junior doctors and has been living in isolation ever since. He tried to find another job, but his bad reputation preceded him, and he ended up opening his own practice. However, rumors spread that he judged people based on their education and family background, and he couldn't attract any patients. As for me, I won the medical lawsuit. Not only did I gain confidence, but my reputation as a strong attorney in medical issues also grew. During this time, Rick showed up at my law firm. Facing me, he apologized. I heard from the director. I'm really sorry for the discomfort my father has caused you, both 3 years ago and now. There's nothing for you to apologize for, Rick. Rick looked somewhat relieved. He told me what he had been up to since that day 3 years ago. Now he's living with Catherine, working at a new hospital, free from Jordy's control, and doing his best every day as a doctor. Listening to Rick's story, I felt a sense of relief. I was happy to hear that both of them had escaped Jordy's control and were living fulfilling lives. Do you remember, 3 years ago, you told me I had the strength to break free from my father's control? Yes, I do. Those words have stayed with me and gave me the courage to leave my father. They've been with me ever since. I had no idea my words meant so much to you. As I said this with a shy smile, Rick looked at me with serious eyes. I know this might sound convenient given the circumstances, but would you consider starting over with me? Rick. If it were me 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to accept. But now, I have confidence in myself. Thank you. I look forward to our future. And so, we decided to start our lives anew. I'm sure many challenges await us. but I believe that together, as we are now, we can overcome any obstacle.
This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in.
But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us.
You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest up for now.
Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? At the same time, I feel pity for these in-laws. In our apartment, one of the in-laws was staying over. As their condition improved, we decided it was time for them to go home. Why did it come to this? Let me tell you the reason. My name is Chloe. I'm in my mid-30s. I used to work in an office near my parents' home. Our family consists of 3 people. First, my husband, Matthew. He worked long hours as a sales representative for a well-known company. He's in his late 30s, 3 years older than me, and we're both approaching our 40s. And we have a daughter, Zoe. A sweet, clingy little girl who is more attached to me than to her father. I grew up as an only child and always longed for siblings.
Oops, I borrowed my sister's clothes.
Or,
I'm hiding this so my brother won't take it.
I used to envy such casual remarks from my friends. I didn't want Zoe to have such longings, so I aimed to be not just a mom but also a sister or a friend she could talk to about anything. Zoe seems to understand that and really loves her mom. Recently, as Zoe turned 3 and became more attached to me, I started longing for another child, a sibling for her. My husband agreed with my thoughts and encouraged us to try together. Last year-end, we found out I was pregnant with our second child during a checkup. We were both overjoyed. It was a long-awaited event, and above all, I was delighted imagining Zoe's happy face. But I realized we had a problem to consider. Taking care of 2 children meant double the parenting work. It was impossible to look after a still young Zoe, deal with a baby, and work at the same time. So, I decided to focus on parenting. I discussed it with my husband and decided to quit my job. But there was an issue with our living space. We lived in a cramped apartment, which would feel even smaller as the children grew. We couldn't just expand our rented apartment as we wished. I talked to my husband. What about the kids' room?
Here, as a kid's room.
He seemed to think it was impossible. I thought so too. That's true. His opinion was only natural. Our conversation ended there for the time being. But it wasn't a problem that could just be left unresolved. I always thought about one solution. We should move. I had long wanted to move. But even if we started looking right away, would we find a place that satisfied our family? After some discussions, we decided to build a new house. This way, we could have as many rooms as we wanted and, in the future, turn them into the kids' rooms. However, neither my husband nor I knew anything about construction. While pondering what to do, my husband had an idea.
Why don't we talk to Dad and Mom?
His words surprised me. At the same time, the faces of those 2 popped into my mind, and I got goosebumps without realizing it. My husband's parents, my in-laws, live in another state. I heard that my father-in-law has been working in air conditioning since his youth. He's done work not just for office buildings, but also for private new constructions. It's true that they have more knowledge in this area than we do. I can't blame my husband for relying on them. Moreover, my mother-in-law has a similar background, and my FIL is the head of a small air conditioning company. Ever since we got married, I haven't gotten along well with my in-laws. There are various reasons for this. For instance, there was this time we went shopping together. I don't like to waste money. When I make expensive purchases, I check the price, online reviews, compare it with similar products for functionality, and then buy only if I'm satisfied. But the in-laws are different. That day, we went to a department store, and Mil stopped in front of a shop.
I want this.
She suddenly spoke in a whiny voice, like a little girl begging my Fiel. She was looking at an expensive bag from a famous brand.
Which one?
Let's see. After looking at it for a while, Fiel went inside the shop. Wait a minute. I tried to stop them, but it seemed like they were intentionally ignoring me. They quickly picked out and bought items without properly checking the prices.
We'll buy some for you too.
She said this and picked out several items on her own. However, they weren't really to my taste, even if they were luxury goods.
No, I'm fine, thank you. What are you saying? You're just being shy because it's expensive, right? That's part of it, but just accept it, it's a rare opportunity.
I refused multiple times. Most people would be happy, but coming from Mael, it felt like she was forcing me. Fiel then frowned.
What's the problem? You don't like me buying for you?
That's right. She doesn't like the items I choose. Here we go again. I hate being made to feel indebted.
I really am fine, thank you. Come on, just accept it.
My husband didn't stop them. In fact, he seemed to encourage it.
I prefer to compare and choose on my own. You think you have such a good eye for comparison?
This comment infuriated me. I wanted to get angry, but arguing in the store would be pointless, so I talked to the clerk and chose the cheapest wallet. But I haven't used it since I don't feel like it. This is how different my in-laws and I are. Even if we try to discuss things, we never reach a conclusion. I would prefer to live without seeing the in-laws if possible. So please, spare me. If I bring up this topic, they'll inevitably suggest living together. In fact, this issue came up before. Ultimately, my husband respected my opinion, and we didn't go through with it. I made it clear to him that we should never live together. A few days later, I started dealing with a contractor I found myself. The budget was more than I expected, but I was excited about getting the layout I wanted. However, I had to stop the arrangements with the contractor because something happened. Suddenly, I felt ill and had to be rushed to the hospital. The tests showed severe anemia. Due to my pregnancy, I was advised to rest and had to be hospitalized. It's important to take care of my health. But I'm worried about how my husband will handle things while I'm in the hospital. He might call the in-laws. And I'm also concerned about Zoe. She must feel lonely since I was suddenly hospitalized. No matter how much I thought about various things, I couldn't take any action. I had to focus on treatment, feeling frustrated. But later, I learned that my worries had become reality. As expected, my husband called the in-laws while I was hospitalized and explained the situation. The in-laws, seizing the opportunity without my permission, went ahead and discussed the new house construction with the contractor. During this time, Zoe had to live with my husband and the in-laws. But like me, she seemed to dislike the in-laws and didn't warm up to them. My husband said that probably because I wasn't there, Zoe became very scared. She cried many times, even though my husband tried to comfort her. 2 weeks later, I was discharged and my husband and Zoe came to pick me up. Zoe burst into tears of joy when she saw me. Then, when I got home, the in-laws were having a meeting with the contractor.
Stay calm. Don't overdo it, you're pregnant.
They said these things to me with a smile. But I thought their concern was just a pretense while I watched them. The next day, the in-laws showed me the floor plan for the property, and sure enough, it was completely different from what I had planned.
Hey, this is different from the layout I thought of.
I felt it was futile, but I asked my husband about it anyway.
Really? I think it's fine. but the previous one seemed more livable.
Dad has seen many properties because of his job. It's safe to leave it to him. As expected, my husband didn't take it seriously. I knew it was futile, but I talked to the in-laws anyway. Please don't do anything on your own while I'm away. My plea was met with a displeased look from Maëlle. She whispered something to Fael, and he stiffened.
This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in.
But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us.
You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest for now.
Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? I was angry, and at the same time, I began to pity these in-laws. For a while, one of the in-laws was staying at our apartment room, but as my condition improved, I decided it was time for them to go home. Once they were gone, I could take the lead again and focus on the new house, progressing the work that had stalled. So, I resumed my discussions with the contractor. But something felt off.
I asked for a bay window here.
That's not possible. Every time I met with the contractor, they became more reluctant. This was unexpected. Wondering why, I called the contractor persistently.
All right, I'll explain.
Finally, the contractor gave in to my insistence and explained. According to him, the reluctance was due to the in-laws' involvement. Apparently, right after returning to their home, they called the contractor and instructed him to be uncooperative with my requests, and to follow only their instructions. How much more do they intend to belittle me? I checked with my husband, but he remained clueless. He claimed ignorance about the in-laws' actions. It was the same response over and over. His attitude seemed suspicious. But with no one to consult, I had to bear the problem alone. A week later, I received a call from someone. As we talked, I arranged to meet this person. We decided to meet at a cafe, and I waited for a safe time when my husband and the in-laws wouldn't notice to leave the house. Sitting at a windowside table, the woman I was meeting quickly spotted me and invited me to join her.
It's been a while.
Have you been well? It's been 3 years. The woman I was meeting with was my sister-in-law, Olivia. Olivia is about 10 years older than me. She is frank, speaks her mind, and doesn't shy away from things. A successful career woman, she's someone I've always admired. We ordered coffee, and after taking a few sips, I started the conversation.
I couldn't talk over the phone, but what is it about?
Today, it's not about us. It's about you and your family.
What do you mean?
I couldn't understand her words for a moment. What could be the issue about us? Did we cause a problem or inconvenience to someone? While I pondered, the matter with Chloe's dad came to mind. Is it about Chloe's dad and them? She sighed deeply and nodded. That's when I learned why the in-laws were so proactive about our new house construction. According to Olivia, the in-laws planned to sell their current home and live with my husband. Initially, they wanted to live with Olivia and her siblings in the neighboring town, considering their old age. However, Olivia had refused this idea. She, too, didn't get along well with the in-laws. It wasn't just a matter of not getting along. Her straightforward nature was something the in-laws disliked. After being firmly rejected by Olivia, both were irate and learned of my husband's plans to build a new house. Quickly, the in-laws secretly communicated with my husband and started planning to live together. My husband intended to have me return to work soon after giving birth and eventually take care of the two of them. In return, the in-laws would give the money from selling their house to my husband. After telling me everything, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Olivia apologized. "It's okay. Please, lift your head."
I don't know the details, but this feels like a crime. A crime? Isn't that a bit over the top?
Olivia shook her head. Just then, her phone alarm went off. Sorry, but I have to go. I've got work. She handed me some money and hurried out of the cafe. Is what she told me true? If so, what should I do? I was troubled. Even if I confront my husband with the truth, it would be futile. It would be even less meaningful to the in-laws. After much thought, I decided not to intervene despite knowing the full picture. The due date for my delivery was approaching. I had planned to return to my parents' house for the birth. I was going to take Zoe back home with me and leave the rest to my husband. After moving back to my parents' house, the new home was completed. 5 days after the new house was ready, I started having contractions and had to be hospitalized for childbirth. Unlike with Zoe, it was a difficult delivery, but thanks to the doctor's appropriate care, I gave birth safely. After the hospital, I spent a month at my parents' house for recuperation. Once I felt better, I left the children with my parents and went to our home alone. I wondered about the progress of the move. I had assumed it was somewhat complete. But in reality, my husband and the in-laws had done nothing, probably expecting me to handle it. They seemed to have been eagerly waiting for my return. The in-laws and my husband were chatting happily. I took my husband aside into another room. What's this all about?
I told you I don't want to live together.
While clicking his tongue, my husband muttered under his breath.
What? If you have something to say, say it.
Maybe this triggered him. His expression changed.
I'm living with them. If you don't like it, leave. So, you won't give it up?
Yeah, I won't.
I'll give you custody of Zoe and them, okay?
Don't say such unreasonable things.
I don't care.
Just do your best.
But as a housewife, that's probably impossible.
Seeing my husband's attitude, which was a complete reversal from when we first got married, I felt disgusted.
Understood. So, is this okay?
I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and handed it to my husband. It was a divorce application. I had struggled with the decision because of Zoe and the newborn baby. But it seemed pointless to continue arguing without any resolution in sight. While at my parents' house, I had gone to the office, gotten the divorce papers, and already signed them. My husband, suddenly presented with the papers, looked slightly shaken.
Hey, is this for real? Deadly serious. I'll pack my things and leave.
With a resolve I had never shown before, I communicated my decision to my husband and then returned to my parents' house. Eventually, I moved all my belongings to my parents' house, and in exchange, the in-laws moved into the new house I was supposed to live in. With everything that had happened, I never set foot in it. What follows is what I heard from my sister-in-law Olivia and others who knew about the in-laws. After I started living again at my parents' house, the in-laws attempted to sell their old house through a real estate agency. But the house, lived in for many years, had holes and cracks in various walls. The kitchen and bathroom fans and faucets were rusted, and the house was slightly tilted. In other words, the house was severely aged. Such a condition meant no buyers. The price offered by the real estate agency was low. It seemed like a dream to build an ideal home, but in reality, with just my husband's income, they struggled with payments. Even with the in-laws working, the salary was barely enough for the three of them to live on. The house became neglected and soon didn't look like a new property. I received several calls from my husband and the in-laws. But I ignored them all. Naturally. There was no reason for me to help them. Years later, they desperately asked the real estate agency to sell the house for whatever they could get. They returned to the local area, but not to a single-family home. I heard from Olivia that they were living modestly in a cheap apartment. After giving birth to my second child, I spent a year living with my parents. But now, things are different. A colleague from the company where I used to work introduced me to several job interviews. I was offered a position in one of them. It's not a luxurious life. But I have my children and my parents. Even without a husband, I feel I can live happily.